So when you look at the assumptions, okay, the first one that we focus on is how much of what students learn in the classroom, we do learn a lot through observation. That's that observational learning effect. They talk about that in the book as well. Okay. So here, the idea is, what do I do in the classroom that's going to reinforce student behavior so that they will want to do it again? That's kind of how there's that behavioral aspect to social cognitive theory. Think about that example that I have up here. You come up to the board. I ask somebody to come and give me a hand with a problem. Student comes up, starts working, sees the problem, starts working on the problem, and many, if not most, stumble, have trouble with the problem, and they finally look to me and they say, I don't know how to do this. I say, that's okay, and so we work through the problem. Now, I ask another student to come up and give me a hand with another problem, and instantly everybody thinks it's going to be a hard problem, similar to the physics problem that I gave you. And what we realize is that I just said, come up and give me a hand with a problem. Didn't tell you exactly what kind of problem it was, and it's an easy one. But what happened was students learned by observing the other student volunteering to do a problem on the board that if you volunteer, you might get stuck with a physics problem. And what happens? Students tend not to volunteer for the next problem. Sometimes people will say, well, what happens if they had been able to get that problem? What if they were to come up and say, oh, that's easy. T equals m times a plus m times g, and then you just take the cosine. This is 15 degrees. We're going to work the problem up. I would look at them and I'd say, fantastic, great job. Can somebody else give me a hand with another problem? And what am I going to find? Probably a lot of reluctance. Why? Because you observed that student get up there and get that problem, and you're thinking to yourself, I don't know that I want that. Okay? I could have flipped the problems around. And then students get up there and do the easy one, smart, smarter, smartest. The idea is they observe how they're being reinforced or how they're being punished, and their behavior is influenced by watching their classmate. That's the learning through observation part. Secondly, we need to separate learning from behavior. Learning is an internal process that may or may not change behavior. Now think about this for a minute. How many of you ever watch Dual Survivor or Naked and Afraid or the show Survivor itself? What is one skill that is really a helpful skill if you are going to be on the show Survivor, or you're going to be on the show Naked and Afraid, or you're going to have to survive someplace in a cold environment, the rainforest, whatever it is? What is one skill that is really helpful? If you're thinking being able to build a fire, start a fire, you would be correct. Okay. Now, the funny thing about it is, I've never done it. Okay, and given the dexterity of my hands, I wouldn't be good at it anyway. But the truth is, I've never done that, but I've watched those shows long enough that I kind of know what needs to be done. All right, I'm not so, but the behaviorist would say, "Well, Eric, I don't believe you know how to do that because I haven't seen you do it." It's like, but I do know how to do it. It's like, well, I'll believe it when I see it. Remember, behaviorists are from Missouri, the Show Me state. Show me that you can do it. Now, I do know about the importance of having that nest or having that bundle that's going to be really dry, whatever I'm going to use for my to start that little coal or whatever else. If I'm doing a bandsaw, or if I'm doing something, or if I've got a fire starter or whatever it might be, right? I know about how I'm going to develop the little teepee structure, that I make sure there's good airflow, I make sure things are dry. I'm not going to smother the. I know all this stuff, but I've never done it. The behaviorist is saying, I don't believe you learned anything until I've seen you do it. And I'm like, but I really have. There's lots of things that students learn, and they just don't have a chance to show you that they've learned it. It doesn't mean they haven't learned it. Think about how many times you guys have taken a test, and you study and you study and you study, and some of the stuff that you studied that you knew really well wasn't on the test. Am I to assume then that you didn't learn that stuff? Should I say, well, based on your test results, you don't know XYZ? Well, you'll be like, no, it just wasn't there. You didn't have an opportunity to show me that you've learned it. Doesn't mean you didn't learn it. Okay? That's the idea. Think about assessment in classrooms. Think about what we do to assess our students. Most of the time, what you find is we have students do a lot of paper and pencil things. Well, we're limited, aren't we? We can't test everything. We can't assess everything. So we take a sample based on our objectives in order to kind of best represent the content area that we're working with. All right? Or if you are doing physical education, you have a performance-based assessment. You're going to have a criteria. Well, what happens if the students don't follow exactly the same set of steps in doing a particular swing or how they throw a ball or how they from badminton or whatever it might be? You can't assess everything with perfection. We have criteria. We try to set these things up, but the truth is, these things are imperfect, right? Does it mean that you haven't learned something because I didn't assess that thing, whatever that skill might be? Of course not. Same thing in music, right? Play a piece of music a bunch of times. Looking for, I have a set of criteria that will assess the performance. Maybe that performance you make a couple of errors, okay? You come in a little bit early, stay in a little bit long, whatever the case might be. All right. Does that mean that you haven't? You don't know what you did? Of course not. Many times people are like, oh, I wish I would have done this. I should. They knew it. They just didn't get a chance to perform that or work that. So the idea is learning needs to be separate from behavior. They're not always identical matched, right? Third assumption is that behavior is goal directed and people work to attain set goals. We're going to focus on, okay, on the idea of self-regulation. How do we help our students become self-regulated learners? One of the things that's really important as teachers is to help our students become that independent, self-regulated learner. And goal setting is a real instrumental part. We'll talk about that in a later video. And lastly is, in social cognitive theory, the behavior changes that we see aren't always from direct reinforcement or from direct punishment. Go back to this example right here. Student gets up to the board to help me with a problem. I then unveil the problem to the student. They are not prepared for that. And they sit there and they struggle and they feel awkward and they feel the eyes of the classmates on them. They don't like that, right? And then eventually they turn to me and they say, I don't know what to do. I'm not sure what I'm doing here. Can somebody else give me a hand or can somebody else do it? And then they go and sit down. Well, that wasn't a very positive experience, was it? Well, what we see is the classmates are looking at the student who goes up to the board. They see them struggle and they say, when I ask for another volunteer, most of the students are like, no, thanks. I don't want to do that. Why? Because they don't want to be set up for failure, even though they don't know what the problem may be. But they saw someone else volunteer, get punished, and they don't want any part of it. What we call that is a vicarious experience. Remember, you've heard the expression vicarious, like some parents may live vicariously through their children. You know, they're playing a sport or they're in cheer or they're in dance or they're in some extracurricular thing and they're like, oh yeah, like they're really into it. And essentially, to live vicariously through their children means through their experiences. Well, that's what Bandura talks about with vicarious reinforcement and vicarious punishment. When you watch someone get up there and volunteer and then essentially be left out in the dark by themselves to try to solve this problem and they don't meet with a lot of success, they feel punished. Their behavior decreases going forward. Well, their classmates all see that and they say, I don't want any part of that. What do? They don't volunteer. Flip that around. Maybe I put up an easy problem. We're playing Pictionary. We're doing a game. We're having fun. Students get up there and meet with a lot of success. And I say, somebody else give me a hand. All the kids are like, me. They want to volunteer. Why? It's fun. They're having a success. I want fun. I want success. I'll volunteer. And then they get up there and wham, I give them a physics problem. No, just kidding. But they get up there and then they get a really hard problem. They're like, oh, come on. Like, I wasn't expecting that. That's an example right there when the students were expecting to be reinforced. They saw their friends being reinforced. They saw that and they get up there and I kind of flipped it around on them. But the truth is, they volunteered and were more likely or more inclined to participate because they saw their classmates succeeding. That's what we're talking about. Okay, the power of reinforcement from behaviorist ideas plays a big part in social cognitive parts. Now, as a teacher, we got to keep things in mind. Another word for reinforcement is, we'll think about it, is it like incentive. Okay, what incentive do the students have to participate? Now, the truth is, as a teacher, I need students to establish or understand that connection between what they're doing and that reinforcement they're going to get. And what we realize is students do not work towards incentives or reinforcement that they don't think that they're going to achieve. Think about this for a minute. Student comes into my office at the end of the semester, says, hey, Eric, I want to know what I need to earn on the final exam to get an A in the class. I said, oh, let's take a look at your grades. And we look through them and lay them all out, 80, 82, 84, 78, 80. We add them all up, right? Look at it and they say to you, oh, you need to get a 98% on the final exam in order to earn an A in the class. And the students look at me. What do you think their next question is? Besides, can I do extra credit, et cetera, et cetera. I say, yeah, the extra credit's already in there. Everything's in there. Okay? They look at it and they say, what do I need to do to maintain a B in the class? And I say, oh, add it up. I say, oh, it looks like you need to get a 48% on the final exam. And they all look at me and they're like, okay, thanks. They know exactly what they're going to do, which is study for just a little bit, make sure you get your B. Okay. Now, I'm the teacher and I'm thinking, but you can still get an A. You just need to get a 98. They're like, man, well, I haven't got a 98 yet. Why would I think I'm going to get a 98 in the final? See, what they're doing is, and I totally respect it, is that they're actually evaluating the chances of achieving that incentive. Students don't work towards reinforcement or towards incentives that they don't feel is within their reach. Okay? So the idea is, as a teacher, when you're trying to shape behavior, change behavior, get them working toward a goal, they only work towards those incentives or goals that they think are within their reach. Now, let's flip this around for a second here with reinforcement and punishment. As a teacher, based on what we've talked about here, one of the things that's really important is I realize, hey, I have to be very careful about what I reinforce, what I choose to reinforce and what I don't, because the students are always watching. If students expect to be reinforced for something and you don't give it to them, what happens to their behavior? Drops down. Think about this. Students hand in homework early. They can go up, drop it off in the little box, reach over into the candy jar, grab out a piece of candy. So they say to me one day, hey, Erica, I'm done with my assignment. I say, oh, go just drop it in the box there. And they go drop it in the box. They go, okay, they drop it up. They're expecting for me to say, well, grab a piece of candy. There's no candy in the jar. They say like, okay, Erica, I'm doing it. And they don't, what do I do? It's like, it's not there. And I'm like, okay, thanks, go ahead and sit down. All right, they sit down. A few days later, they're dropping off another piece of homework early, and they're like, I'm going to drop it off by the candy jar, right? Right? They're trying to give me hints, like, hey, Eric, fill up the candy jar. And I'm like, yeah, just drop it off there. Well, think about that. If I don't have any candy, they don't get any candy for for turning it in early, what are they likely to do going forward? Not do their homework early. So suddenly, I was using a reinforcer to change behavior, but I don't give it to them, their behavior drops off. Flip that around. If I don't punish behaviors that are expected to be punished, watch what might happen. They talk about this in the book. I always say, we know we're not supposed to cheat in class, right? You're taking a test. What happens when the teacher's looking around and she sees the students and sees a couple people cheating and she doesn't do anything about it? Suddenly you might find that other students start cheating as well. And if you don't believe me, just think about when you're driving down the highway the next time and you have car after car going by at 80 miles an hour and you know the speed limit is 65. Did you start to speed up a little bit? But you know it's wrong. Yeah, we might do that, okay?